If you don't listen today, you may regret it tomorrow. God warns you, listen now. Have you ever felt that restless feeling in your chest, as if someone were trying to tell you something important, but you just can't understand? Maybe it's not just chance. Maybe it's the voice of God. Yes, God speaks, and sometimes his silence is exactly the cry you need to hear. But ignoring this divine call can cost you more than you imagine. After all, what would you do if you knew that your tomorrow could depend on a decision you need to make today? In this video, you will discover how to recognize God's message amidst the noise of the world, understand why God's silence does not mean absence, and most importantly realize that every moment can be a divine opportunity in disguise. If you're seeking spiritual transformation, answers for your life, or simply trying to understand why certain doors remain closed, stay with me. Because perhaps God's calling has already been made and you just haven't realized it. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and share this video with someone who needs to hear this urgent message. Challenge phrase: God calls me today. I choose to listen. Write this phrase in the comments and prove to yourself that you are willing to hear his call. God's calling on your life. God knows exactly where you are, what you feel, and what you need. Have you ever stopped to think that the emptiness you feel isn't a coincidence? It's not a lack of material things or recognition. It's God calling you. Yes, God's call often doesn't come loudly, but in the form of restlessness, emotional exhaustion, or even that strange feeling that something is missing. This isn't coincidence. It's the Creator's gentle touch saying, "Son, I am here." You might be wondering, but why me? Why now? The answer is simple. God knows your heart better than you do. He sees where you are, understands your hidden pains, your silent battles, and knows exactly what you need, even before you ask. And even when you feel you don't deserve it, he insists. And here's a piece of advice. Don't ignore this feeling. Don't treat God's call as something trivial. It's a divine opportunity, a chance for spiritual transformation that you may not have tomorrow. It's an invitation to trust God, to allow him to guide your journey. It's time to listen to this voice of God that echoes within you, even when everything around you seems silent. Recognizing the divine calling in the midst of difficulties. Struggles can be spiritual opportunities in disguise. You know that difficult moment that seems to have no way out? Perhaps that's precisely where God's calling manifests itself. We often mistake difficulties for punishments, when in reality, they are spiritual opportunities in disguise. God uses struggles to awaken your attention, shape your character, and bring you closer to him. Spiritual transformation doesn't begin on easy days. It's born in silent battles. Think about how many times you've asked for answers, and instead of ready-made solutions, challenges have arrived. Coincidence? No. Every obstacle can be God's voice saying, "Look to me, trust me, walk with me." And in these moments, true faith is put to the test, and acting with faith becomes more than theory. It becomes survival. Here's some practical advice. When facing a crisis, don't ask why, but for what. This simple shift in question can open your eyes to the purpose hidden behind the pain. Your current difficulty may be the divine opportunity you've been waiting for. Only it came packaged unexpectedly. The value of time and decisions on the spiritual journey. Every decision today shapes the story of your life. Did you know you're one decision away from completely changing the course of your life? Every choice, no matter how small, is a piece of a puzzle that only God can see whole. The problem is that most people underestimate the power of small daily decisions. Have you ever done this? Put things off until later, wait for the right moment, or simply ignore that inner calling that demands an act of faith? Well, that later can cost you dearly. Time is a divine gift, and God never wastes moments. If he's calling you today, it's because he knows this is the right time. Don't let fear or doubt delay his purpose for your life. The decision to trust God, even without all the answers, can be the turning point in your spiritual journey. Want a practical tip? Grab a notebook and write, "What step of faith can I take today?" Reflect, pray, and don't procrastinate. Every wasted minute is a missed divine opportunity. Remember, God's call doesn't wait forever. The time is now. How God speaks. Inner voice, experiences and silences. God uses details of life to communicate. Many people expect to hear God's voice as if it were thunder from heaven, but the truth is quite different. God's voice is often subtle, almost like a whisper amidst the din of everyday life. Sometimes it's that restlessness in the heart, that doubt that insists on lingering, or even an opportunity that arises without logical explanation. Yes, God speaks and uses simple details of life to do so. You know that friend who gave you unexpected advice, or that sermon that seemed tailor-made for you, maybe that silence that bothered you so much? All of this could be God's way of trying to reach you. The question is, are you listening with your ears or with your heart? A practice that can help. Set aside daily moments of silence and prayer. Turn off your cell phone, close your eyes, and simply listen. Don't wait for an audible response. Wait for direction, peace, and discernment that emerges like a gentle touch to the soul. God's silence is often an even stronger call than words. Pay attention. God speaks all the time. The question is, are you listening? Listening with the heart, an attitude of spiritual sensitivity. Let divine messages influence your choices. Have you ever noticed how easy it is to listen to the world, but so difficult to hear God? It's because His voice doesn't impose itself, it invites. Listening with the heart means learning to develop a spiritual sensitivity, that subtle perception that only arises in intimacy with the Father. But be careful, this isn't something mystical or reserved for special people. Anyone who seeks can learn to recognize God's call. Want a practical example? Before making any decision, big or small, ask God in prayer, "What does the Lord want for me in this situation?" It doesn't have to be a long prayer. A simple, sincere dialogue opens the door for divine action. After that, pay attention to the feelings that arise, the doors that open or close, and even the peace or restlessness that invades your heart. Spiritual sensitivity is like a muscle. The more you exercise it, the stronger it becomes. And by strengthening this inner listening, God's messages cease to be confusing signals and begin to guide your concrete choices. Trusting God becomes more than just a nice message. It becomes the real filter by which your decisions are made. Missed opportunities. The risk of ignoring the call, disregarding signs from God, can bring regrets. Ignoring God's call may seem harmless at first. After all, who hasn't thought, "I'll figure this out tomorrow"? But tomorrow doesn't always come, and every ignored divine opportunity is a closed door that may never open again. How many times have you felt you should act but preferred to postpone? Be careful. Disregarding God's silence or the gentle voice of the Holy Spirit can turn moments of blessing into sources of regret. Reflect. How many opportunities have you let pass you by, waiting for clearer confirmation? Maybe that door that closed was God trying to protect you, or that person who appeared out of nowhere was an answer disguised as a coincidence. The problem is that many people only recognize God's action when they feel His absence. Here's a simple exercise. Today, write down the latest coincidences you've experienced. Then pray and ask if they weren't actually a calling. Don't ignore the small signs. God works in the details. God's call is persistent but not infinite. Divine opportunities are like seeds. If not planted at the right time, they will never blossom. Immediate action. The right time is now. The Holy Spirit whispers that the time to act is today. You know that idea that you need to wait for everything to fall into place before you begin? Forget it. Acting in faith doesn't wait for the perfect moment. God doesn't call when you're ready. He calls to prepare you along the way. The Holy Spirit constantly whispers that the time to act is now, because every second lost could be a wasted divine opportunity. Spiritual procrastination is a subtle trap. You postpone decisions waiting for a clearer sign, a sense of security. But true security only comes after a leap of faith. Want practical proof? Remember that decision you put off for months and, when you finally made it, realized you should have done it sooner? That's exactly it. Here's a challenge. What do you feel God is asking of you? Now, write it down. And most importantly, take the first step today. Whether it's a prayer, a conversation, a change in attitude, something needs to start now. Don't wait for a grand revelation to act. God acts in the present. The calling is for today. The decision is yours. Don't delay God's purpose by waiting for the perfect timing. The ideal tomorrow is a dangerous trap. How many times have you said to yourself, when everything is right, I'll start? Well, know this, that so-called perfect tomorrow is an illusion. Waiting for ideal conditions to answer God's call is like waiting for the sea to calm down before learning to swim. God works in the present, in the now, precisely because he knows that if it were up to you, fear and insecurity will always find a reason to paralyze you. God's purpose doesn't require you to be ready. It only requires you to be available. And that means saying yes, even when you have doubts, even when you don't understand everything. The decision of faith doesn't depend on complete certainty, but on trust in the God who calls you. Want some practical advice? List all the excuses you usually use to postpone decisions. Then read them out loud one by one. Notice how small they seem compared to the magnitude of the God who calls you. You don't need to have everything figured out to obey. You just need to get started. Believe me. What you call waiting for the right time, God may be calling disguised disobedience. Acting now isn't rashness, it's true faith, courage to go through the doors that God opens. God opens doors, but it's up to you to walk through them. You know that moment when everything seems to fall into place, but fear paralyzes you? Well, it's true. Sometimes the door you've prayed so hard to open is wide open before you, but insecurity prevents you from walking through it. And here's a hard truth. God opens doors, but he doesn't push anyone through. The decision is yours. Don't wait to feel complete courage to act. True faith is precisely about moving forward even when you're afraid. This is why so many people miss divine opportunities. They mistake comfort for confirmation. But God's call isn't always accompanied by emotional security. Often, it requires courage to break free from what's comfortable. Want something practical? Look at your life today and identify which open door you've been avoiding out of fear. It could be a reconciliation, a change, a project, or even a fresh start. Pray about it and ask God, do you want me to walk through it? Then, regardless of the emotional response you feel, take the first step. Remember, the open door only makes a difference if you have the courage to walk through it. God's silence is not absence. It is a time of formation. Silence serves as preparation and strengthening of faith. Who hasn't felt God's silence and thought, has he forgotten me? Well, know this. His silence isn't abandonment. It's strategy. When God is silent, he's forming something in you. It's like a teacher during a test. He remains silent because he's already taught you what you need to know. Now it's time for you to walk by faith. Many people give up in silence, but therein lies the secret. True spiritual transformation happens precisely in those periods when everything seems at a standstill. God's silence tests your trust. It's easy to believe when everything goes right, but what about when he doesn't answer? Then your true faith emerges. Want some practical advice? During periods of silence, replace the question, why doesn't God speak to me, with what does he want me to learn in this silence? Use this time to strengthen your communion with God, even without feeling any emotion. Pray, read the Bible, and remain faithful. The lack of answers isn't the end of the conversation. It's an invitation to spiritual maturity. In silence, God speaks in another way, through your resistance, your patience, and your perseverance. Choices. Delayed are opportunities lost. Every ignored choice is an unlived transformation. You know that "I'll see later" thing you repeat almost without realizing it. It could be taking you away from God's plan. Postponing spiritual decisions is like refusing invitations from heaven, waiting for a more comfortable day. But here's the problem. Postponed choices become closed doors, and each closed door can mean a spiritual transformation not experienced. God respects your free will. He doesn't force anyone to act, but his call doesn't wait forever. Every ignored yes is a lost divine opportunity. Have you ever thought about how many changes you could have experienced if you had said yes sooner? Want something practical? Make a list today of the decisions you know you need to make, whether it's getting baptized, forgiving someone, starting a ministry, or simply starting to pray again. Now look at this list and choose one thing. Don't put it off until tomorrow. Start, even if it's just one small step. True faith is proven in action, not intentions. Divine opportunities have a deadline. God's call is today. To delay is to reject, even without realizing it. Every small decision can change the course of your life. Like dominoes, your decisions influence the future. Have you ever thought about how something small can change everything? A simple decision today could be the starting point for a spiritual transformation you couldn't even imagine. It's like that domino effect. One knocked over piece triggers a movement capable of altering the entire scenario. Your daily choices, whether actions, words, or thoughts, are these pieces. Sometimes we wait for great revelations to act, but God works through small acts of obedience. He wants you to take the first step, even if it seems insignificant. Praying for a few minutes a day, reading a single verse of the Bible, deciding to trust God in a single situation. These small actions combined create a life shaped by divine purpose. Want a practical exercise? Choose an area of your life where you feel God calling you. Now commit to taking a small, consistent step in it every day. Trust. The simple yes you say today can open doors you can't even imagine yet. God's calling doesn't require grand gestures. It requires your decision, however small, to begin. Moving forward, even without all the answers. An act of faith. Keep going even when the path seems uncertain. Many people get stuck waiting to understand everything before taking the first step, but God doesn't work that way. His calling requires faith, and faith is precisely walking without knowing exactly what awaits you. If you wait to have all the answers before taking action, you'll miss the right time. God lights the path as you walk, not before. It's like walking with a flashlight in the dark. You only see the next step, not the entire journey, and that's okay. True faith is born when you obey without seeing the destination, trusting only in God's voice that says, "Go, I am with you." Want a practical tip? When you're afraid to make a decision, remember something simple. God doesn't need your understanding. He needs your obedience. Pray, "Lord, even without understanding, I will trust." Then take action. You don't have to be perfect, you just have to start. Walking without all the answers isn't recklessness, it's dependence on God. And this dependence transforms uncertainties into testimonies. Don't wait for clear signs. Act on God's voice. Acting with faith precedes visible confirmations. Have you ever noticed how common it is to ask for signs for everything? As if God needed to place a "go this way" sign in front of you. But the truth is, most of the time, true faith calls you to act even before visible confirmation appears. God's call is often an inner impulse, a whisper that defies logic, and it's up to you to trust. Remember, miracles usually come after the decision, not before. When Peter walked on water, he didn't wait for the safety of dry land. He obeyed Jesus' voice and set foot on the impossible. The courage to act, even without guarantees, opens doors that signs alone never will. Want something practical? When you feel that invisible nudge to act, even without concrete answers, recognize it. It's the voice of God, and act. You don't have to wait until you feel ready. Readiness comes from taking action. Waiting for eternal confirmation can cause you to miss God's move. Act first. The sign will come later. Turn impossibilities into miracles. God makes the impossible possible when you act. You often look at a situation and think, this is impossible. And do you know what God thinks? Perfect. Now I can act. The impossible isn't an obstacle for the Creator. It's the ideal setting for Him to manifest His power. But there's one catch. Miracles don't happen while you're still. God turns impossibilities into miracles when you decide to act in faith. Want a practical example? Think about biblical stories. The sea only parted when Moses took a leap of faith. The walls only fell when the people began marching. Do you see the pattern? God responds to the movement of your faith. When you act, even without control, He takes action. Today, look at what seems impossible in your life. Now reflect, what action of faith can you take in the face of this, even if it's just a small one? Remember, God's actions are perfect, but they require your step of trust. Turning the impossible into the possible isn't your responsibility. Acting with faith is. Surrender dreams to God for Him to transform. Give Him the impossible so that the miracle can happen. Often, you hold on to your dreams so tightly that you don't even realize you're preventing God from acting. The truth is simple. As long as you insist on controlling everything, miracles won't happen. God doesn't invade closed spaces. He acts where you surrender. And surrendering dreams to God isn't giving up on them. It's allowing Him to transform them. Think about the difference between dreaming alone and dreaming with God. Alone, you're limited to what you understand and can achieve. With God, the impossible becomes a reality. But this requires a difficult act. Letting go. Placing your plans in His hands and saying, Lord, do it your way. Want something practical? Grab a piece of paper today and write down your biggest dreams. Then, in prayer, surrender each one to God. Say sincerely, if this dream isn't yours, take it away. If it is, transform it. It seems simple, but this act of faith releases His action. Remember, you don't need to understand God's plan to trust. Just let go. When you surrender, He transforms. God doesn't want your perfection. He wants your availability. God uses willing hearts, not perfect ones. Many people think they need to be ready or good enough to be used by God. This is a big mistake. God never sought perfection. He seeks availability. Perfect people don't exist, but people willing to obey, even if full of flaws, are precisely the ones God chooses to transform stories. Want proof? Look at the characters in the Bible. David was a simple shepherd, Moses a fugitive, Peter an impulsive fisherman. None of them were ready, but they all said, "Here I am." And that's enough. God doesn't expect you to have everything figured out. He just wants your yes. Here's something practical. Stop today and pray like this. Lord, I don't know how, but I'm available. Use my life. Sound small? Maybe. But this simple prayer can be the beginning of a gigantic spiritual transformation. Don't let the weight of your failures keep you from your divine purpose. God knows exactly who you are, and yet He calls you. Availability is all He needs to get started. Accepting the divine call, starting point of transformation. Saying yes to the call is the beginning of spiritual change. Accepting God's call doesn't mean understanding everything or feeling prepared. It simply means saying yes when your heart feels the divine invitation. This yes is the starting point. Spiritual transformation doesn't begin when you feel strong enough. It begins when you admit your weakness and decide to trust God. Maybe you're waiting for a great sign to act, but the sign has already come. It's that discomfort in your chest, that restlessness in your soul. God's call has already echoed within you. Now all that's missing is your response. Want something practical? Close your eyes for a moment and say in prayer, Lord, I accept your calling. Even though I don't understand everything, I want to begin this journey with you. There you go. It doesn't have to be more complicated than that. The most important step is the first. Every true change begins with a simple decision. Your yes today could be the beginning of a completely different story. The call has been made. The answer is in your hands. Decide today. God's calling is now. He has already spoken to your heart. It is up to you to decide. God doesn't schedule appointments with tomorrow. His call is always for today. If you feel something in your heart now, it's because He's already spoken to you. The next step depends solely on your decision, but be careful. This decision isn't something distant or abstract. It's practical. It happens when you choose to trust, act, and surrender, even in the midst of doubt. How many times have you felt God's touch and responded, I'll see later? Well, know this, that later may never come. The divine call is urgent, not because God is impatient, but because He knows how much you need to change now. Spiritual procrastination steals more dreams than failure. Want a challenge? Today, before you go to sleep, pray, Lord, today I decide, use my life from now on. This simple commitment is the beginning of your spiritual transformation. God has already spoken to your heart. The divine opportunity is before you. Now all that's left is your decision. Every step of faith leads to spiritual transformation. Don't let fear or doubt paralyze you. If you wait for the absence of fear to act, you'll never get anywhere. Fear is real and so is doubt, but God calls you to move forward even with them. Every step of faith you take, even trembling ones, is a step towards spiritual transformation. Don't wait for complete strength to begin. God strengthens you along the way. Spiritual transformation happens progressively. It's like climbing a ladder, one rung at a time. Sometimes you look up and feel like you'll never make it, but the secret is to focus on the next step. That's all. True faith isn't the absence of questions, but the decision to move forward despite them. Want some practical advice? Identify an area of your life today where fear has paralyzed you. Then, do something small to overcome that fear. It could be starting a prayer, seeking counsel, or simply choosing to trust. God doesn't require giant leaps. He honors small, sincere steps. Every step of faith you take opens the door for God to act. Transformation begins exactly where you choose not to stop. Believe God has a greater plan for your life. He wants to transform your story, but the first step is yours. No matter how much you try to plan everything, there's something only God sees, your life's greater purpose. No matter how many mistakes you've made or how distant you feel, He still has a plan for you. And it's a good plan. The problem? That plan won't come to fruition without your decision to say yes. God respects your choices, but He continues to call. Your future doesn't have to be a repeat of the past. There's a spiritual transformation in store for you, but it begins the moment you decide to trust the Creator. Don't expect to understand everything. Just believe God has already written something greater for your story. Want something practical? Today, declare out loud, God has a greater plan for my life, and I accept living that purpose. Say it, even if you don't feel it. Your own declaration can be the first brick in this new construction. Remember, God doesn't call the capable, He empowers those who accept the call. Change begins when you decide to believe. Now that you know God's calling on your life, the big question is, what will you do with this message? Continue waiting for the perfect moment or start acting today? Remember, every small step you take is a divine opportunity seized. Spiritual transformation doesn't happen suddenly, but begins when you say yes, even without having all the answers. Think for a moment. What decisions have you been putting off? What step of faith has God already asked you to take? Perhaps your next prayer needs to be less about asking for miracles and more about the courage to walk through the doors God has already opened. If this message spoke to you, write here in the comments, "Today I choose to trust God." Declare this as a public commitment of faith. Also, share a personal experience. Have you ever felt God's calling and postponed your response? And of course, subscribe to the channel, activate the bell, and share this video with someone who needs to hear this message today. Your decision could be the beginning of a miracle in someone else's life too. God doesn't want your perfection, He wants your availability. And perhaps all He expects now is your yes.